As a widowed father, navigating the challenges of raising a teenage daughter alone had become my solemn routine. Our home, nestled on the quiet outskirts of town, was a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. Life had settled into a semblance of normalcy, despite the occasional teenage rebellion that echoed through the halls. It was on a rainy Saturday afternoon that everything changed. Sarah, my daughter, had always been curious and headstrong, traits that mirrored her late mother. I was in the garage tinkering with an old lawnmower when she burst in, her eyes gleaming with excitement and mischief. "Dad, look what I found!" Sarah exclaimed, holding out a cracked cell phone in her palm. Raindrops trickled down her cheeks, mixing with the excitement on her face. The device looked ancient, its screen shattered and flickering intermittently. Despite its sorry state, it emitted a faint glow that caught my attention. "What's that, Sarah?" I asked, wiping my hands on an old rag. Curiosity sparked within me as I approached, squinting to read the faded letters on the back of the phone. "Apocalypse," I muttered under my breath. Sarah shrugged nonchalantly. "Found it buried in Mom's old stuff. Must be ancient. But look at this," she said, tapping the screen where a single app icon blinked insistently. "It's called Apocalypse." Weird, right? Unease stirred in the pit of my stomach as I took the phone from her hand. The screen displayed nothing but a single, ominous icon, a black circle with a swirling, crimson vortex at its center. Something about it sent a chill down my spine, as if the device held a secret too dark to comprehend. "Maybe we should just throw it out," I suggested, trying to ignore the unease creeping into my voice. But Sarah's eyes, normally bright with defiance, now held a glint of fascination. "Nah, Dad. I want to see what it does. It's probably just some old game or something." Reluctantly, I handed the phone back to her, silently hoping it was nothing more than a forgotten relic of the past. Little did I know, that cracked device held something far more sinister than we could ever imagine. Days turned into weeks, and the cracked cell phone soon became a constant presence in Sarah's life. I watched from a distance as she grew increasingly engrossed in its mysteries, her once vibrant personality overshadowed by an unsettling fixation. "Sarah, don't you think you've been spending too much time with that thing?" I ventured one evening, leaning against the doorway of her room. The air felt heavy, charged with an inexplicable tension that seemed to emanate from the device. She glanced up briefly, her eyes reflecting the eerie glow of the screen. "Just exploring, Dad. It's like there's a whole world inside this phone." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, a flicker of unease that I couldn't shake. I knew I should intervene, but each time I tried, Sarah's resistance grew stronger. Locked behind her bedroom door for hours on end, she spoke less and less, her conversations replaced by the soft hum of the phone and occasional mutterings that chilled me to the bone. Late one night, unable to sleep, I found myself standing outside her door, listening to the faint murmur of her voice. It wasn't the voice of my daughter. It was distant, distorted, as if filtered through layers of static. Fear tightened its grip on my heart as I pressed my ear against the cold wood, straining to make out the words. "Show me," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Show me what you can do." My blood ran cold. Who was she talking to? What unseen entity had found its way into our lives through that accursed device? The thought gnawed at me, a growing dread that threatened to consume everything I held dear. The next morning, I confronted Sarah once more, my voice laced with concern and frustration. "Sarah, you need to give me that phone. Whatever it's doing to you, it's not right." She recoiled, her eyes flashing with an intensity one had never seen before. "You don't understand, Dad. It's like it knows me. It knows things." I reached for the phone, my hand trembling with resolve, but as my fingers brushed against the cracked screen, a surge of electricity shot through me, forcing me to recoil in shock. Sarah's laughter echoed through the room, a hollow, unnatural sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Dad, you can't stop it," she said, her voice a chilling whisper. "It's too late." And in that moment, I knew. Whatever had taken hold of my daughter wasn't human. It was something darker, something beyond comprehension, and it had no intention of letting go. Days turned into a blur of unease and inexplicable occurrences after the unsettling discovery of the cracked cell phone. Sarah's behavior grew increasingly erratic, her once bright eyes now clouded with a distant darkness that sent chills down my spine. I began to notice strange happenings around the house. Objects moved when no one was near, whispers echoed through empty corridors, and shadows danced in the corners of my vision. Each night, sleep eluded me as I lay awake, listening to the soft hum of the cell phone emanating from Sarah's room. One evening, as I passed by her closed door, a cold draft brushed against my skin, carrying with it a faint whisper of voices. I paused, my heart pounding in my chest, and pressed my ear against the wood. The voices were muffled, indistinct, but tinged with an unmistakable malevolence that made my blood run cold. "Sarara," the voices hissed, a chorus of unnatural tones that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. "Bring us, bring us." I recoiled, my mind racing with fear and confusion. What had Sarah gotten herself into? What dark forces had been unleashed upon our once peaceful home? That night, I ventured into her room while she slept, the glow of the cell phone casting eerie shadows across her face. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, as if tapping out a rhythm only she could hear. I reached for the device, my hands trembling with a mixture of determination and dread. But as my fingers closed around it, a searing pain shot through my body, as if 1,000 needles pierced my skin. I gasped, dropping the phone to the floor, where it lay inert, its screen dark and lifeless. Sarah stirred in her sleep, a frown creasing her brow, but she did not wake. I retreated from her room, nursing my throbbing hand, my mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. What had just happened? And more importantly, what had I unleashed by attempting to intervene? Days passed in a blur of fear and uncertainty. Sarah grew increasingly withdrawn, speaking only in hushed tones to the unseen presence that seemed to hover around her constantly. I tried to reason with her, to plead with her to let go of whatever hold the cell phone had over her, but each attempt was met with a cold indifference that chilled me to the bone. And then came the night that changed everything. It started with a flicker of movement outside my bedroom window. A shadowy figure, tall and unnaturally slender, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the mind, but when I looked again, the figure was gone, leaving nothing but a lingering sense of dread in its wake. I turned to Sarah's room, my heart pounding in my chest, only to find her standing in the doorway, her eyes wide and unseeing, her body swaying as if caught in a trance. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice hoarse with fear. "Sarah, what's happening?" But she did not respond. Instead, she raised a finger, pointing towards the cracked cell phone lying innocently on her bed. And in that moment, I understood. The cell phone wasn't just a device. It was a gateway, a portal to something dark and ancient, something that had latched onto my daughter with unyielding claws. And as Sarah turned towards me, her eyes glowing with a malevolent light, I knew that whatever had possessed her was no longer content to remain hidden. The air in the house had grown thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint hum of the cracked cell phone that had ensnared my daughter's soul. I stood in the doorway of Sarah's room, my heart pounding in my chest, as she turned towards me with eyes that no longer held any semblance of humanity. "Dad," she whispered, her voice hollow and distant. "You shouldn't have tried to take it away." I took a cautious step forward, my mind racing with fear and desperation. "Sarah, please. Whatever this thing is, we can fight it together. You don't have to let it control you." But she shook her head, a twisted smile curling her lips. "It's too late for that, Dad. It's too late for all of us." With a sudden burst of speed that defied human capability, Sarah lunged towards me, her hands outstretched with unnatural strength. I stumbled backwards, my heart hammering in my chest, As she pinned me against the wall with a force that sent shockwaves of pain through my body, her eyes bore into mine, their once familiar gaze now filled with a darkness that threatened to consume me whole. "Give it to me," she hissed, her voice layered with a cacophony of voices that echoed through the depths of my mind. "Give me the phone." I struggled against her grip, my thoughts clouded by a primal fear unlike anything I had ever known. With each passing moment, Sarah's humanity slipped further away, replaced by a sinister presence that whispered promises of power and dominion. In a desperate bid for survival, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a hammer I had grabbed from the garage earlier. With trembling hands, I swung it towards the cracked cell phone lying on her bed, aiming to shatter the device and break the hold it had over my daughter. But as the hammer connected with the screen, a deafening roar filled the room, a chorus of anguished screams that reverberated through the walls. Sarah's grip faltered for a brief moment, and I seized the opportunity to wrench myself free, staggering backwards as shards of glass and metal flew through the air. The room was engulfed in chaos, a tempest of swirling shadows and unearthly cries that tore at my sanity. Through the haze of terror, I saw Sarah collapse to the floor, her body convulsing as if caught in the throes of a violent storm. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the cacophony ceased. The air grew still, thick with the acrid scent of ozone and burning metal. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest, and saw Sarah lying unconscious amidst the wreckage of the shattered cell phone. Trembling, I knelt beside her and gently cradled her in my arms, relief mingling with sorrow as I realized the toll this ordeal had taken on my daughter. She stirred faintly, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine, and for a brief moment I saw a glimmer of recognition amidst the darkness that had plagued her. "Dad," she murmured, her voice fragile and weak. I held her close, tears streaming down my cheeks as I whispered words of comfort and love. "It's over, Sarah," I said, my voice wavering with emotion. "You're safe now. We're going to get through this." But even as I spoke those words, a lingering dread weighed heavy upon my heart. The horrors we had faced were not easily forgotten, their echoes lingering in the corners of our minds, a reminder of the fragility of our world and the darkness that lurked within. As the days passed, Sarah slowly began to recover, though the shadows of our ordeal lingered in the corners of our home and hearts. We spoke little of the events that had transpired, choosing instead to focus on healing and rebuilding the trust that had been shaken by the sinister presence that had invaded our lives. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Sarah turned to me, her eyes clear but haunted. "Dad, do you think it's really over?" I sighed, pulling her close. "I hope so, Sarah. But we have to stay strong and vigilant. We'll get through this together." She nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "I won't let anything like that happen again. I promise." We took steps to safeguard our home, ensuring that no relics of the past would threaten our future. The memory of the cracked cell phone faded, replaced by the comforting routines of daily life. Yet, in the quiet moments, I could still feel the faint echo of those dark days, a reminder that the battle between light and darkness is never truly over. But as long as we faced it together, I knew we could withstand whatever shadows might come our way.